afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session on simplifying U.S. ISO lines compliance. I'm Nicole Gibbard. I'm here with my colleagues Dan Wang and Anant Manu, who will come up and tell you more about how we plan to simplify your implementation and maintenance of your ISO lines. Just a couple of housekeeping items to start with. Please hold your questions until the end. I will come around with the mic, come to you. So at the end of the presentation, if you just raise your hand, I will come up and talk to you. Also, at the end of the presentation will be a QR code where you can leave feedback, and we really appreciate all of your feedback on how you found the session. Also, as a reminder that anything future-looking is covered under our Safe Harbor Agreement. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dan.
I do?
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
It's actually not.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Anant Manu. I'm the product owner for the Bureau Content Commercial Lines from Services Solutions. Dan is here with me.
I'm Dan Wang. I look after our specialist consulting center, and part of what my team does is rolling out this new service.
Yeah, from agenda, real quick, and there's a lot of content, and I've gotten a lot of questions as well leading up to this session, so I'm very excited to be here with Dan. We will go through some common themes through commercial lines adoption, right? I think they would resonate with you, and then we'll go into some of the new things which we are going to offer, in the market space. With that, let me first start with, we'll get to this content. I want to start with the statement that if your commercial lines program or any program is going fine, perhaps it's not going fast enough. Right? Because that's, going fine requires planning, everything is good, but commercial, especially bureau content implementation, it requires a lot of rigor. There are so many parallel things which are happening at the same time. So usually, implementations would hit some of these areas, and if there are some, it's not a churn, it's a lot of opportunity for alignment within the teams as well. If they hit some areas, you're doing okay, because you're doing fast-paced implementation. What that means is, that we want to release perhaps in 12 months, 8 months, 6 months, whatever your output which you expect from your program. As the teams are implementing commercial lines bureau content, there are common themes, I'm sure that you've heard from your teams, that require a lot of effort. Some of them are right in here. Forms, first and foremost, US bureau content means that life is forms. That's how all that stuff is driven, right? We find out what the forms are, then we try to translate what does the form need from the transaction processing system like Policy Center, because Policy Center is created as a very expeditious financial transaction recording system. So in that, there's a lot of work to be done to present those transactions in a paper form. Again, you don't control those forms. Verisk does, or ISO does, right? So you have a set format, lot of big effort area from mapping the transactions to the form content itself. Another one, big effort area is that, well, as soon as you figure out, I have a factory model for all these implementation, let's say from the firm's perspective, I'm good. I know where the stuff is at. And suddenly you get new Verisk update, new ISO update. Business teams wants them. So what that means is another big effort area for your program to dig into and try to figure out, how do I apply these updates, the brand new prescription from Verisk. As those updates are being applied in any program layer, like if you're doing some digital innovation, there's parallel team, tough one, large effort, that's going on as well. And financial reporting as well. It's not an easy area. So usually when I said that, if your program is going okay, it's not going fast enough, meaning that there are big effort areas which any bureau implementation would have to solve for. We've listed some of these in here, right? The I want to say the repetitious model is that once you're done, you have to repeat that over and over again, not only in your development, but in your production as well, because updates never stop. Veris keeps on pushing those updates out. In that, when I say Veris keeps on pushing those updates out, those updates need to be applied somewhere. And in this context, I want to align with you if you're already familiar with the SBT standard-based content template and its structure. Good, but if there is somebody who does not understand, let me take a few seconds to go through this model. How Guidewire standard-based templates, they are published are, for example, Guidewire provides the base platform layer on which any application runs, Policy Center being one of them. That's the bottommost layer. On top of that is Policy Center and SBT content, standard-based template content. Policy Center is there. It understands what a transaction is. It understands what an account is. It understands what a policy is. It understands what a document or a note is. So it has all those constructs. On top of that, any LOB, commercial auto, or whatever that is, that's also the responsibility of Guidewire to produce and provide to you. So those are the two layers. Then on top of that is where our program comes in, which is you have to do some changes. There are some changes which are required. For example, completing the stat code assignment, I want to say development, and then making it ready so that it can be reported to the bureaus. Right? There is some work required in there as well. Product packaging itself, there is some work required. Sometimes it's very intense, right? Because we have to create the packages themselves. How will we present that to our agents and brokers and ultimately the customers? Different endorsement types. These are required changes which you will have to take on in order to be able to write your first policy, right? Underwrite and push your first policy out. So these are required, but on top of them, some programs also take in some changes which are discretionary, meaning that what they are thinking about is to extend their market lead, perhaps in some area. Maybe they have very astute financial models predicting the pricing around or pricing boundaries around the risk which they write. That is quite a complex area, but it's a discretionary change. You may or may not include that, maybe not in release 1, maybe later, but our implementations do see a flavor of those. So in this context, bottom two layers, Guidewire responsibility, push out the updates. The next two are where we see most of the changes, right? This is where the most of the conversations and the implementations go through. With this alignment, for any SBT which Guidewire publishes, construct is exactly the same as it is in there. Now, what are the SBTs, standard-based templates, which Guidewire publishes? They're on the left. There are 6: general liability, property, BOP, commercial auto, crime, and workers' comp. I want to take a moment to orient ourselves on how does Guidewire produce that content, because I think that's important. Guidewire and Verisk, we've worked together, and we've established a model where Verisk produces ERC, electronic rating content. Electronic rating content, rating there is the misnomer. Maybe I can say misnomer, maybe not, but because that electronic content includes more than rating prescription. It includes forms, it includes different rules, it sometimes includes additional risks or additional coverages which Verisk prescribes that the customers can adopt, right? That's included. In Guidewire, our product dev team has done a very good job in automatically consuming that ERC content, packaging it up as an SBT update. Now, what is that SBT update? That SBT update is something which Policy Center understands. It is a product model that SBT updates contain. And Policy Center says, yeah, I know what this product model is. Commercial auto, I know where to place this model. So it goes in the commercial auto, product model space, and depending on what covers are included in the product model itself, they are placed either depending on it hangs off the clause or something like that. So they are there. Form rules, they're there in Policy Center, right? The UI rules, the dependency rules, they're there in Policy Center. So all this content, SBT update content, which Guidewire automated machinery produced, it is consumable by Policy Center itself through some tooling. excellent, right? So that is the mechanism of keeping our implementation current, right? But you have to go through that process of applying those updates, which are understandable by Policy Center. They're published by Guidewire as SBT updates. So with this, now I want to move to, so this is where, after this alignment, right, this is where the heart of the conversation starts. So I'm going to orient us in two different, they're color-coded as well, yellow and green. Let me talk about the left three parts. From Guidewire Bureau content availability perspective, remember when I said that I mentioned if your program is going okay, it's not going fast enough. These are the big effort area which, once the program is going fast enough, cause a lot of parallel conversations. Big effort area. When I say big effort areas, I'm not saying hundreds of hours. I'm saying thousands of hours worth of effort, right? It's big. In our services strategy to ease the pathway for adoption of Bureau content, we're going to address some of these three specific areas as our step one of making this adoption easier. Those three areas are forms mappings themselves, right? The mappings, the content is printed on the form, but where does that data come from? Once your initial implementation is done for that mapping, the updates or at a specific cadence, how you consume or accept those updates, they should have some form as well. So we are going to address both of them. So here, the left part is the initial part of the implementation. Same thing with digital experiences. What we mean by digital experiences is there is a construct which is fairly standardized, we would say, that from the digital experience perspective, which should understand Bureau content commercial policy, or GL policy, workers' comp policy. Those are the templates which nearly everybody would start from or use, right? So that is what we want to share with you as a starter content as well, right? Data solutions. I mentioned those bureau reporting constructs, right? You would always have to do the liability reporting, PD reporting, WC stat, WC pols. We have to do that because bureaus demand us to do that. All these are established processes. We cannot change them, even if we wanted to, right? You're doing that. So in the quest from a Guidewire services perspective to reduce the overall adoption pathway, there are some standardization opportunities which we want to use. In the data case, standardize the data models itself, which are available to you so that you don't have to figure it all out. Let us do that because we understand the model, right? So these three areas, that's where we're going to start from. And on the right, how do we get this in your hands is first and foremost, install and unlock the content itself. So in your implementation, we will, services will install that content, unlock, make that ready for your use. And once it is ready for your use, then we start to update that at some cadence as a part of our update service. Right? And that update service is, depending on the cadence right now, Dan is going to share more on what that cadence is. A lot more is coming. I won't speak anything on that, right? Slides are coming. So I think this is how we are thinking, right? What we are thinking is reduce the pathway for adoption for any implementation. And second is for that update service to keep you current through those updates. And we'll cover the surface area. We'll dig into the details of what are the surface area of these updates. Or I know each one of you have the question which will be answered in the next slide, which is this: when will this be available? Right? Which is, we are planning on making the initial content available aligned with our SBT lines towards the latter part of Q2 next year. So I think very excited. Again, the areas which we are targeting are very astutely cherry-picked because those are big effort areas, right, for our installation and update service. But with that, I think this is the roadmap itself. Dan, I shared that. Yeah. There's a lot more detail following this, where we have to, how do our customers use the update service, or what do they get?
Yeah, thanks, Anant. I actually thought you were going to just do my presentation for me.
Oh my God, no.
I'm just sitting here and just waiting, but it's cool. All right, so as Anand was talking about, where I think some of the challenges that he went through, right, is really about the amount of work it takes to take the actual standard-based template and then do the data mapping to get to the forms and then the digital and data layers, right? Well, so we have this content. Okay, so how do we get there? And then Anand mentioned the installation activation, right? So, so the way we're looking at this is we want to simplify and accelerate your project by standardizing the content, but also put it in there for you so you can start the project on day one to hit the ground running, right? So anyone that's started a Guidewire commercial project, commercial lines project, you probably know that, oh yeah, we get a GWCP instance, but there's no commercial lines in there, so how do we do a workshop to do requirements? Well, you have to go install it first, and then even then, you're probably only going to get part of the way there because we don't have the digital, the data, or the mapping in there. So part of what we want to do with the activation is really to do this before you kick off your project and put in the components that are relative, and then you can start your inception by having all the content there so you can have a meaningful workshop around the requirements and how you want to tailor or customize your line of business. And the standardization is quite critical to this. Obviously, if we don't have a standard way of putting this content in and having it look a certain way, it makes it difficult to maintain, right? So the standardization really kind of serves two purposes. One, to provide you a lift on a project, but also make it available so that we can make it possible so we can provide updates to that content. Since we know what starting point looks like and what the current version of SPT looks like, we can identify what that is and put the updates in for you. Okay, and I think the other thing, there's some other kind of intangible benefits to this, which is by having this content standardized, it should reduce. Our belief is it reduces the number of decisions you have to make as you start a project, which ultimately will let your business focus on other stuff that's probably more relevant as opposed to, well, how should we represent the ISO line in Policy Center, right? Like that to me is not really high value work for your business team. It's probably more around like, okay, how do we drive more business or grow other parts of our business. So, and what we want to do with the update service is, so again, this is really focused on the 6 standard-based templates that we have. And I mean, the first thing is we want to have a service that keeps you current. One of the things that we've heard from customers that have used SPTs is, yeah, we take SPTs where we take updates, but probably not as often as we like to, and we want to filing extensions or exceptions for new stuff that the ISO publishes, right? And we want to do this in a mechanism that's 4 updates a year, which includes everything in the SPT that Anand alluded to earlier, which is you get the product model, you get the availability rules, and as well as the forms inference and the mapping layer that we're developing. All that will be as part of the update, and you get that 4 times a year. At and when you want to request it. So we want to make it flexible, so you can decide when you want to take an update. So for example, if you have a lot of other things going on, you may not want to take an update right away. You might want to wait a week, 2 weeks, a month. But when you're ready, just let us know once the SPT is published. Let us know you want to do the update, and we'll put that in within 20 business days. And the third point is, we want to do this in a way that's familiar to you as a Guidewire Cloud customer. So you may be aware that as part of Guidewire Cloud, when you want to take a new ski resort release, Guidewire will take that release and put it into an environment of your choice, where then you can then take and promote to other environments or wherever you're doing work, right, with that new release. So our intent is to deliver these updates in a similar manner. You tell us when you make a request when you want the update, point us to an environment where you want the update put in, and we will run through the merge process, let you decide which ones you want to consume or don't want to consume in terms of the changes, and then we'll put it in that environment for you to do as you will, like put into your release 2 branch, or your production branch, and so on and so forth, right? So you have the flexibility there. Our aim is to make this as simple as possible. I think, obviously we have 5 steps here. It's probably might be an oversimplification. Obviously, a lot of work goes into each step, but effectively for the carriers, you only need to worry about, Guidewire's publish a new SPT and decide when you want to take that update, and you let us know, and then we'll start working on it. We'll do the analysis. We'll figure out what content has changed, and potentially what have you deviated from base ISO on and that you want to keep. So we'll identify that. And then once we have the analysis and and all the pre-work done, we'll work with your business teams to identify, okay, now it's time for you to make your adoption decisions. So here's the 15 things that are new in this SBT. You were 100% compliant with the base ISO. So do you want these changes? Yes, great. Then we'll put it in. That's when we'll get to step 4. We'll apply it into that environment that you have designated for the SBT updates. We'll put that in there and we'll merge it with your existing code base so you have a fully functioning updated version of the SBT with your main production branch code in there. So then at that point, the carrier would, you can take it and test and deploy that. So run through your standard regressions and deploy it to production, right, when you're ready. So again, we want to make this as simple as possible for carriers. Obviously, you guys your core business is running insurance companies, right? And a lot of this is still IT work behind the scenes. And so we're trying to make that a little bit easier for customers that want it. So we're excited to announce that as of today, actually even earlier, we have the service offering available for all the SBT lines. So the 6 that we saw in the screen above. And really, it's just to simplify the adoption curve for our customers to be able to get current on ISO changes. Now, you're probably asking, well, what do we do with our other commercial lines that are not ERC or non-SBT, right? So we're also happy to say that that is something we're looking at, we're exploring, and we are going to be providing a service to get the circular updates into your environment as well, in the same framework and paradigm that we're doing for the SBT lines. Obviously, there's some nuances too because we don't have a standard-based template to start with, but our intent is to deliver updates in a very similar manner into an environment of your choice with the updates that you want to consume. How will, you said looks like it's going to be delivered like a cloud update. Well, what does that mean? I think from a Guidewire customer standpoint, usually you guys have multiple releases of work going on. You have your release 1, release 2, release 3, so on and so forth, depending on how you staged out your work. And then once release 1 is live, you're also going to have an ongoing stream of work, probably a production release every month or every 2 weeks, right, depending on your cadence. So there's going to be a lot of stuff going on, and and so when an SBT comes in, you're probably going to need to promote this to any number of environments, right? So that's why our intent is to deliver like a cloud update. We will take the new SBT. We will run through all the technical aspects of getting into an environment that you designate, and then you can then take that code and promote it to your ongoing monthly production release to immediately release your business, or you can push into your release 2 or your other branches of work that you have going on. So you can make sure all going forward development is using the latest and published version of the standard-based template. And we'll do this over the time continuum. So, again, we'll do 4 updates a year per line. So each SBT will have its own set of updates, and so whenever, so in theory, we can be having concurrent updates going on as well. If you have 4 lines, you may be having 4 different updates, in which case we'll give you 4 different packages of code that you can then deliver and promote to whatever environment you want, okay? So with that, just to kind of summarize, one of the things that, obviously the main things that we're focusing on here is we want to standardize the US Bureau content. We believe that will reduce your implementation effort. I would say, believe is probably not a strong enough word. It's actually, we know it will reduce your time to implementation because we're giving you a lot of the predefined patterns that ISO prescribes. It's just not in the SBT, so we're going to have that. It's also going to come with a digital and data migration tool so that you can get your digital front end and your existing policies into Policy Center sooner, as well as some curation for reporting, for Stat Bureau reporting, that kind of stuff. So it should greatly reduce the efforts. And then lastly, we want to simplify the process and time commitments to stay current with ISO by giving you the update service so that you can be compliant with SBT lines without having to distract your teams that are already busy with other stuff to do these SBT merges into your environment. So with that, I do want to thank everyone for their time today, and we're open up for questions and anything you guys might want to dig into.
So you mentioned like standardization, right? So what exactly means standardization? How it is different from what is being delivered as a SBT package today versus how the standardization is going to be. So we are ISO customers, and we consume the SBT packages. So from that standpoint, like today we use the PCA tool to install the SBT updates. So what is mean by standardization? How it is be different from what we're doing today?
That's a great question. So what I mean by standardization is really just, so you know SBT comes with like the product definition, your coverages, the limits, some of the rating and so on and so forth, but there is some stuff that's not in the SBT itself. So all the data mapping for all your forms. And for that, what I meant by standardization is if we, by Guidewire taking the initiative to map out all the data you'll need for these forms, that kind of provides a standard starting point for all insurance carriers that are implementing these SBTs, and then as well as creating all the digital screens that are not mentioned to right now. We obviously just launched our JDP platform. It doesn't come with digital screens for all the SBT lines, so we want to create the standard screens for that as well. So as a carrier, you could just say, okay, I'm going to put in commercial auto. Well, Guidewire will have the forms mapping. We'll also have all the digital screens, so you can start any of the policy and transactions on a digital channel, as well as have some of the standard data feeds for reporting for that line of business. So that's what I mean by standardize the content. If you think about today, each carrier that implements SBTs has to go and build each of those components on their own, right? So, across our entire ecosystem of customers, everyone's version of those three things look a little different. And so we want to give you guys a standard starting point, and that way we can also give you the updates in an efficient way. Okay.
And this includes APIs as well?
Yes, includes all the cloud APIs as well for the SBT lines.
So the follow-up question is like, so we already does the mapping for the forms, right? Okay, so how does it intersect when you say like forms mapping? Like, so we have a strategy to map it through some process, like we have a document generation process, right? So when you say like we already in the process of using them and then generating the forms content.
Yeah, so if you've already done your forms mapping, then not all the updates will be, like, we can still apply the SBT for you up to a certain point, up until the point of the forms mapping, because obviously you have your own kind of strategy and approach for mapping it. But we can still give you the updates for the SBT itself, which would be any of the product model changes, any UI changes, or any of the rating algorithm changes that comes with the base ISO SBT.
My question is, so if you're using the ERC product definition, what would the data structure look like in terms of like a rating request or response? Would that follow the same type of structure as ISO's RAS, rating as a service? Or would that look different?
I can take that. Yeah. So in that, the rating contained within Guidewire, I mean, that's a translation of not RAS, but it's ERC content itself, right? That is, we call it RTM. That's a rating module. It has been there for forever. I mean, when I say forever, many years. The SBT contains the rating in the construct of RTM. So what this means is that the calls, perhaps, if I'm understanding your question, which happen to rate a policy, they're contained within the policy footprint itself. We use RTM. It's not going out to RAS or any other rating engine to rate that policy. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I get that part, but I just mean like when you're translating it basically to your policy center, is it following a similar structure to ERC in terms of the data structure? Because RAS would follow ERC's general structure of how the product is formatted and the way that the coverages work.
That is 100% true. We follow that structure, but the way the rating, perhaps, Verisk RAS service or Guidewire RTM, how they expect the constructs to be, they're a little bit different. But for them, risk object is a risk object. Policy clause is a policy clause. Policy limit is a policy limit. The lookup table is the lookup table. It should be exactly the same.
Thank you.
I have a question over here.
Hi, you've indicated it's the US ISO. Does that include the state-specific rules?
That is a true statement. State-specific rules, but there are a little bit more detail in that. Some states do not publish their updates through ISO or ERC, electronic. They do not have that. So SBTs do not cover that part because it's not electronically available content for us.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Two questions. So first one, we have the old SPTs. We are on version 8, doing the cloud migration now. We have the CP7 and all those. So is there a plan, like, can we also make use of the upgrades as it becomes available?
Do you make those updates?
We haven't taken any upgrades.
I would love to connect with you in a session where we can get to those details. The reason being, you have a construct which has perhaps even those templates are a little bit older. How do we catch them up? If there's a path, what that path does look like? It would deviate from what we are offering in here for sure, right? But let's dig in deeper. I'm happy to jump into those details. That is one of the areas which we are very interested in to figure out.
Yeah, I think to Anand's point, our expectation is that we will be able to, like, with some updates to what you currently have, it will be at a point where we can give you the updates as well.
So pretty much like a first time, it will be more work, then after that, we'll be like aligned, kind of.
Yeah, when you say more work, a lot more work, yes.
Okay, the second question was like, you mentioned that after doing the upgrade, you guys will be providing like a list to the business and let the business decide, okay, what I want to keep, what I don't want to keep. So do you think it's going to be like not like developer intensive work? Like we will not be required, like our IT team will not be required to like make changes, but you are kind of asking the questions to business and making the changes yourself and then providing us. It's not like we get everything and then now we need to decide, okay, business doesn't want this, business wants this.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. So we will work with your business to identify which ones they want to adopt, and then we'll put that in, we'll package it and put it into that branch for you with merged against your production code, and then you'll have to just do some regression testing on it and then deploy it. But yes, we will make sure it's technically all put in, so your IT team won't have to do the merge or update of the SPT.
Okay. What kind of output will that be for business to decide like what they want to take, what they don't want to take?
Well, it's going to be a spreadsheet with just here's the list of all stuff, and then here's ones you've deviated. So if you've deviated, the assumption will be that you'll probably keep those because I'm sure you filed for all that stuff already, right? And then it's just the stuff that here's all the stuff that's new in ISO that's changed will be effective at some point in time in the future, and then your business will decide, yeah, I want that, or maybe in some cases you might decide, I don't want to take that change, right? So that'll be the ones that will be in scope for review.
Okay, thank you.
Have you come across any challenges when you install SPT lines on the non-SPT, which is running on the cloud?
I want to ask a clarifying question. SBTs on non-SBT?
We have non-SBT lines running on the cloud right now.
Okay.
So if I would like to bring SBT lines and install on top of non-SBT, that is running on cloud, Guidewire Cloud. So have you come across any challenges?
When you say challenges, how I describe those challenges they are developer work, right? You have to merge some very specific common areas within Policy Center so that both lines or even SBT lines can coexist within the construct of Policy Center, right? For Policy Center, transaction is a transaction. What I'm trying to say is that you have non-SBT lines, and if you want to install the SBT lines on that to make them coexist in the construct of the transaction, you have to do a little bit of work to merge those different the transactions from different LOBs. That's just one example. So what this means is it's not like hundreds of hours of work. It is a week worth of perhaps, if I can project the effort. There is tooling which is available out of the box. We call it a PCA tool. It understands that it's a SBT. It's an SBT update. It also understands that there could be other LOBs which are installed in there. So it does help with that merge, but some developer intervention is required to do that last mile intervention.
I think you mentioned that your update provides cloud APIs and maybe the JDP templates, right? Does that mean that when you're running the updates, you're running cloud retrofit since it's not APD native?
That is correct. That's actually a good pickup. So as part of the installation, we are put in the SBT and that like commercial, whichever line that's in your scope. We'll also give you the cloud APIs that are specific for that line. And then as part of an SBT update, if something requires, if there's a required change in the API layer, we would push that down as well.
Okay. At the risk of going off topic here, do we have a roadmap to go APD native?
There is, I see James over there.
I was going to say, I think you're sitting very close to the gentleman who will be able to answer this.
Yes.
He's our product owner for SBT lines. James, sorry to put you on the spot. Please.
Yes, there is a roadmap for us to go APD native, as well as natively on cloud rating in the rural service as well. So we are moving through that. It'll probably be the next 18 to 24 months as we go through that process. And as you probably heard earlier today or yesterday, we'll look at moving to that model as well. So migration over there as well.
With 4 SBTs every year, if the customer is not current with the SBT and they want to go with current, but they have to do multiple SBTs in between, is there an option to skip and directly go to the latest SBT, or they have to do a sequential upgrade?
Excellent question. The SBT is how ERC services, it is always a catch-up. So if you miss, and towards the earlier question as well, you miss 2, 3, 4, 5, there would be a lot of burden of proof to be carried towards the last update, but they are catch-ups.
Okay.
Right? And I say that in the context of, I'm assuming they're not like from 1989 or something like that. They're okay.
Hey, with the circular update, I have a question. I know you mentioned about you're trying to build a process for the circular updates from SBT standpoint with the forms inference. Will you also be coordinating the actual forms template updates? Because Verisk is going to send the ERC content to Guidewire.
Yes.
Similarly, Verisk is going to send the template changes or forms to whoever it is. Smartcom, GhostDraft, whichever ECM player is, right? As part of this update, you're going to make sure that both are in line, that testing is going to happen. When it comes to the customer, the onus for me is only to do the regression. I'm assuming that you have already tested the inference and the actual forms with the ECM platform.
Yeah, so customers can choose different dog production vendors. With a few dog production vendors, we have that deeper relationship, and then there are some levels in there as well. So I know why the question came across. So the dog production vendor which you are using, we are fairly integrated with them and talking through the details of how to make the update life a lot more simpler or efficient, in the context of the question which you asked. So what that means is updates from SBTs and updates to the templates itself. They need to work hand in hand so that you are able to see the final result, right, in your installation. No more question because everybody wants to go party. I know
think
that.
that's right. Do we have any more questions? Okay, one over here.
So when these updates are made, if you still have edge APIs, how does it work? The changes will only reflect on the cloud APIs, right, for your digital layer?
You have stumped me. I did not think of the edge APIs, but I think they remain the same. Do you know?
Well, so I think that's probably something we have to work through on kind of almost like an implementation discussion around it, because to do, like if you implement a new SBT line, you'll have to get to the cloud APIs for a lot of the integration needs anyway. And we'll probably have to figure out if you have an existing implementation using Edge, what that means. I don't think we don't have a great answer right now, but it's probably something we have to have an offline discussion around. But certainly any new SBT would have to have a set of cloud APIs that you'd use, and then we'd have to figure out like what you would need to do with the ones that are, the Edge are using.
Yeah. In the context of other question as well, that we have a document production system which is already in place or some concepts. So the coexistence of some of these assets, I think we need to think about that too. And it is in our crosshairs. That's a good conversation to have.
That's it then. Thank you everybody, and appreciate everyone's time. And so thank you very much.